Hey everybody, Ryan FMTG here, and last week, so this video is a couple days late, but hey, better late than never, hopefully. Teppen announced that they are doing another balance update that I think is going to be implemented at the next downtime, which I would assume is the start of September, which is pretty cool, right? And when I hear balance updates, I think of nerfs and maybe some buffs, because more times than not, in most games, and especially in Teppen, we have been seeing a lot of nerfs. However, there's no nerfs. They are all buffs. And there are 3 of them. So there's not tons of changes, but hey, any change can, well, potentially be good. Maybe not great, but, could be good, and it's always something to talk about. So I want to talk about the 3 cards that are going to be seeing changes, and then kind of talk about just nerfs and buffs in general. So the first card that is getting changed is Roaring Typhoon. Before, it was 5 MP, deals 7 damage to all units with flight, and then it removes flight. And this is a legendary. It's been around for a very long time, and it doesn't see much play because, let's be honest, it's not good. However, it's getting an extreme buff. The only change, right, the text stays the same, but it goes from 5 MP all the way down to 2 MP, which is such a humongous reduction, and I think this will make Roaring Typhoon an actually really, really good card, because there are a lot of decks that revolve around flight units, or just a lot of really powerful units with flight, and this just straight up kills those units, or if it doesn't straight up kill it deals 7 damage to it and removes flight from all units with flight. So it's a flight board wipe, and having it be 2 MP is so low, where a lot of green decks, kind of regardless of the meta, could just play this, and worst comes to worst, you do not need a target to play Roaring Typhoon, so worst comes to worst, you could just kind of play it kind of fizzles, doesn't do anything, and you just draw a card. So a lot of times, like, yes, it might be dead in hand, but you still can just kind of cantrip, draw another card, and go from there. And when the effect actually hits, this effect is fantastic. So I think this made it from a pretty darn bad legendary to a really good legendary that a lot of green decks will play, because the upside is very, very high, and the downside is not that low. Crescent Grizzly is the second card that is getting a change, and this has, came out with the newest set, so it hasn't been around that long. Before, it was 5 MP for 1 attack and 4 HP, while on the field, all friendly machine units gain +2 attack. That stays the same. What changes is it's going to 4 MP, as well as the stats are changing. It's going to become an attack of 0 and an HP of 5. So kind of a little bit difference here or there. So altogether, it is 1 MP cheaper. Yes, the attack is 1 lower, but it basically just gives itself 2 attack, so it still has 2 attack, more or less. And the HP goes 1 higher, which is nice because 5 is a lot more HP than 4, so this means it will stick on the battlefield, for longer and can come down earlier. So overall, this seems like a very good change to Crescent Grizzly, especially with, mono green or green red machine decks, because this is a really good Lord effect, right? Pumping all your units, all your machines with +2 attack is a really, really nice effect. However, MP cost 4 units are very fragile to Fate of the Unworthy. And also, now that this starts with 0, so basically this has 2 attack, not 3 attack, this dies to Murder Spikes, which are 2 of the most popular black removal spells to kill units. And yes, of course, it dies to most all removal. Also, against purple decks, it gets bounced so much more. So overall, I actually think this is kind of a nerf to the card, because yes, it's getting a little bit better, but dying to Murder Spikes and Fate of the Unworthy is such a big downside for this type of card, or for really any card, and it's not, the stats aren't getting pumped that much. So overall, this buff seems like a nerf to me, and makes Crescent Grizzly something that doesn't seem as good as it used to be. Pyron is the last card we need to talk about. Before, it was MP cost of 8 for 5 attack and 7 HP. It says victory, gain 2 MP. After, basically everything stays the same. However, the HP goes from 7 to 8. So a very, very slight buff here. And overall, I think this is good, right? Because just going from 7 HP to 8 HP is like a significant buff, right? That means that, Ryu Hadoken doesn't kill it straight off just with a Hadoken, that, maybe a little BB Hood action plus Hadoken has to be performed to kill Pyron. So overall, yes, it's nothing to scoff about 1 HP, but I still don't know how much Pyron's going to see play, right? This is a card that hasn't seen tons of play because 8 MP is very expensive for this type of unit. And now just with a 1 HP increase, I don't see this seeing, sure, it will see maybe a little bit play, but I don't see it seeing tons more play because of this buff. Okay, well, those are all the cards that we needed to talk about, and yes, there was not tons of cards, and that's fine. Basically now, I want to kind of end this video with a little tangent rant about balance updates. I think games, especially digital card games, it is so important to be doing balance updates because you're never going to get something right the first time. And so being willing to throw out balance updates kind of frequently, yes, it shouldn't be every week or something because then us as players will get balance fatigue. But, you know, once a month or something like that seems fantastic. And I really, really like what this implicates for the future of Teppen balance changes, that right here there's 3 buffs. Well, I kind of think Grizzly is kind of a nerf, but you can argue that it's a buff, and that is fair, right? It is getting better, but also weaker at the same time. However, I think it's great that they are like, you know what? Maybe not everything should be a nerf. Maybe some of these cards that aren't seeing play is because, you know, they're not that good, so let's try to boost them up rather than take some things down. And that can be really, really fun because if you're just giving, because, you know, when it comes to the end of the day, balance updates are here to usually make the meta and the game more fair, so more people can play more different types of decks. And so, you know, that's kind of the goal with nerfs. That should be the goal with buffs. And if you can do both, and kind of at the same time, that can make for a really, really fun, unique meta that changes over time and not just when new cards come in. And so I'm really, really happy about this. And I just kind of hope that Teppen keeps on, you know, nerfing what needs to be nerfed and buffing some things that aren't seeing play. And I think that's great. And so this really makes me happy for the future of Teppen and especially balance updates, even though this one might not have a lot of meat to it. And at the end of the day, probably won't change the meta or that many decks overall, but the implications there that, hey, they're doing a little bit now, maybe they're going to do even more in the future, or just a little bit every couple months, and hey, a little bit here, a little bit there can really add up to a lot over time. So I'm happy with this, even though, yes, it's not going to change that much, but hey, we'll see. Maybe Pyron's going to become fantastic, and I'll kind of eat my words in a little bit, but is what it is, and I will see you all next time.